It's 100 years since the Russian Revolution. And it all started here. And it cut off Russia from the world for nearly 70 years. But new DNA evidence suggests that 1 in every 600 Russians has Scottish ancestry. I'm discovering Scots who made a massive impact on Russia's history. Some made the former empire their home, and others fought and died there. From those who helped to establish Russian football, to those like me who came to Russia at a crucial time in their life, they found Russia beautiful, captivating, and quite exasperating. This is from Scotland to Russia with love. Your choice. I first went to Russia 30 years ago to teach a series of Shakespeare workshops to young Russian actors. It was my first experience of Russia and of being in a documentary.
We have to really keep this text. It's tricky, but it's...
I'm now going back to find out about other Scots who came to Russia and made the empire their own. Our journey starts here in Luchers, Fife, with an intriguing link between Russia and one of Scotland's most respected regiments, the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. This regiment is about as Scottish as they come, but they have Russia in their hearts. Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia. In 1894, he was given the honorary title of the regiment's first ever Colonel-in-Chief.
What we've got here is a troop in what we would call it in the Tsar's day.
Taking up the story is Commanding Officer Lieutenant Colonel Dominic Coombs.
So we're in Fife. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah. And of course we're talking about our relationship with Tsar Nicholas and with Russia. And we wear these grey berets, which are the mark of the Scots Greys, and the cap badge. And there's a black backing to it.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
And common folklore and the internet will tell you that we wear this in mourning for the Tsar. I think the reality is we've worked out is actually it was the black backings to put the silver badge to show it off better against the grey beret.
Right. But the regiment's historical link with the Tsar is very real.
Corporal Bell here is holding this icon.
It's of Tsar Nicholas II.
And so when Tsar Nicholas... Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. This icon was a gift from the people of Russia. Many in the regiment believe it gives them good luck.
It's been to Kosovo, it's been to Iraq twice, it's been to Afghanistan twice, and then anywhere we go in the future, whenever we go on operations, that comes with us. And goes and sits sort of next to me wherever I am.
Even if you're in the front line?
Yeah, anywhere. So,
wow.
In Afghanistan it went in various vehicles, and so yeah, it's travelled. And so yeah, so we take it with us everywhere.
I love that.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tremendous.
We just, so we look after it, we
yeah,
cherish it.
Yeah,
and I think it's it's a great link.
And now it's in Fife.
And now it's in Fife, in Lucas, yeah. I'm very proud to have it here.
Yeah, great. Nicholas II was the last of the 3-century-old Lermontov dynasty. That the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards carry this piece of history wherever they go is truly amazing. But first, we have to find out where it started. Helping me understand the Russian connection is Brigadier Mel Jameson, chairman of the Scots Dragoon Guards Museum Trust. And what's the uniform he's wearing here?
That's the Scots Greys.
That is the Scots Greys uniform.
Full dress of the Scots Greys with all his...
This is the Tsar?
This is the Tsar, again, on his royal yacht Standard. And the band played, the Scots Greys band played on the yacht for him.
I love this picture, and I love this torch he's somehow gone down with it.
That picture still hangs in Buckingham Palace. And Queen Victoria was so fond of her great-granddaughter, Alexei, that she turned out at the front door to meet her, and as she called him, Nicky.
In 1896, the Tsar and his wife Alexei, granddaughter to Queen Victoria, visited Balmoral. This rare footage captures that moment. The royal couple had been married 2 years, a fairy tale romance that Queen Victoria believed would help create peace within Europe.
Tsar Nicholas, Tsarevich Nicholas actually, came over because Queen Victoria had a review of her troops at Aldershot. And riding past, one of the regiments was the Royal Scots Greys. And he said to Queen Victoria, seeing all these grey horses and scarlet tunics, what a beautiful regiment. Then there was a pause. He got married the same year, and Queen Victoria made him Colonel-in-Chief, probably one of the first foreign monarchs to be made Colonel-in-Chief of a British regiment.
Was that like a wedding present?
Indeed. That's the way I look at it.
Wow,
It's a wedding present.
Wow.
20 years later, Europe was in the grips of World War I. In Russia, Tsar Nicholas II had been forced to abdicate after losing the support of his battle-weary army. When the Bolsheviks took over in 1917, Nicholas and his family were imprisoned. A year later, an order, almost certainly from Lenin, was given to execute the royal family. Tsar Nicholas, his wife Alexei, 5 children and 4 servants were taken down to the cellar and shot.
The regiment must have been then incredibly affected by the assassination, what eventually happened to him.
Yes, the tragic death of the Tsar in 1918. From that moment on, the one thing that happened, and still happens today, is that when we have a formal dinner in the officers' mess, we will play before the loyal toast and the national anthem, God Save the Queen, we will play the imperial anthem of Russia, one verse in memory of the Tsar. It's done with us sitting down, as we sit for the national anthem as well, strangely, sitting at attention, remembering the Tsar for that period in time, and we take it very seriously. As you can imagine, the occasional dinner got a bit rowdy, so there were rolls being thrown occasionally, and there was never any damage to the Tsar.
The regiment has one more magnificent reminder of the Tsar, their murdered colonel-in-chief.
He's very like King George V.
They were so alike, weren't they?
So like.
Yeah, incredibly alike. King George V and him, they could have been twins. And he had these eyes, these amazingly blue eyes. I always felt with Nicholas II, he had tragedy written all over him.
But he's well remembered and revered in the regiment and part of our wonderful history.
Yeah.
So we've had everybody come and have a look at it, Sotheby's and Christie's, and everybody's fascinated.
And it's probably worth a few shillings.
A few bob. Yeah.
We Scots certainly love lost causes, and there's nothing more romantic or tragic than the demise of the Russian imperial family.
But there are many other links between Russia and us Scots.
Welcome to Russia. Where I'm standing is arguably the heart and soul of this great country. And there is no better location to show Russia's turbulent past than here, in this very spot. Krasny Plощad, Red Square.
In the 15th century, Red Square was little more than a shanty town of wooden huts housing criminals, peddlers, and drunks. Now, from the iconic St Basil's Cathedral to the Kremlin, where leaders since Ivan the Terrible have ruled, it's a tourist destination, and the historic center of Moscow.
But if you know where to look, you will find the presence of we Scots everywhere.
The original clock in the Spasskaya Bashня was built by a Scot, Christopher Galloway, in 1624. Besides this beautiful Orthodox church is the entrance to the Grand Kremlin Palace. It's a place that strikes fear in many, but I have been given privileged access. Citadel of the Tsars, it was once the very center of the Soviet Union. But even here, there is a mark of the Scots.
We come through these pair of extraordinary gold doors. Gold, real gold. Into St. Alexander Room. Unbelievable. I don't think we've got anything to match this. It's hard to believe, but during the Soviet period, these rooms were treated in a utilitarian fashion. There'd be huge tables here and desks and lots of people bustling around for meetings, trying to ignore this absolute spectacle, pretend it wasn't here. Must be very, very distracting. It's a magnificent piece of work, absolutely magnificent. We come to the room of our mutual patron saint. And here we are, the St. Andrew's room, the throne room of the Tsars. Gobsmackingly beautiful. No people, just me. Incredible. If you look way up high, you can see a little St. Andrew on his cross, the Saltire. It's quite funny. He's wearing what can only be best described as a pair of wee white jockeys. Good old St. Andrew.
The St. Andrew's Hall is one of 5 massive chambers within the Kremlin. In 2012, it was chosen to host President Putin's inauguration.
So here, very evocative, in the midst of all this amazing splendor. It's also such a strong reminder that St. Andrew, I mean, he's all over the place. I mean, he's part of the Russian emblem with the two-headed eagle, and there's St. Andrew crucified in the middle. And how much that Saltire has come to mean to us. So it's something we have in common.
Well, there's only so much gold a man fae Dundee can take. It's time to leave the big city of Moscow. I'm now traveling back in time to the medieval town of Viborg, close to the border of Finland. This reenactment group come from all over Russia to follow in the footsteps of Patrick Gordon from Aberdeen. In the 1690s, this Scottish soldier was the highest-ranking general in the Russian army. They're led by Boris Migorsky.
Станислав Маркович, ты сейчас будешь стрелять и курить, это будет самое оно. Да.
I thought you behaved in a very commanding way just now.
Yes, see those stripes?
Yes.
It means I'm a sergeant.
Sergeant.
Слушай, тихим шагом прямо! Ступай! Направо швинкуй!
For the last 14 years, Boris and his group have been researching Patrick Gordon's regiment.
What are you going to show me?
We will perform the drill manual of late 17th, early 18th century with flintlock muskets. This is more or less what Patrick Gordon taught his troops.
These roots lie in Patrick Gordon.
Yes, the words of command, all the motions, we can be sure that they're more or less authentic.
In the middle of the 17th century, Russia's army was largely made up of villagers defending the motherland. In 1661, Patrick Gordon began to professionalize the army. This drill is an example of the ones taught by Patrick Gordon.
That's the sense of, firing in volley. When 100 muskets fires, it will all look like everybody fired.
Yeah.
But when you look at individuals...
Yeah. So do you take them to task if they don't fire properly?
Yeah, of course.
What do you do?
That's all I can do. It's,
Pointed finger.
It's a hobby.
Yeah.
I want to find out more about Patrick Gordon and why he came to Russia in the first place. In Scotland, few have heard of him, yet here he's not just remembered, he's revered.
How this man became like a father to the Tsar is as long and as deep as the Russian metro itself.
Maybe he was in the right place at the right time?
It's a common sight. You'll see people touching the dog for good luck, and so they have a good day. And you can see it's quite worn away here. In fact, that's what the metal would have been. See?
To find out more, I'm going to meet Dr. Dmitry Fedosov, a historian who's been researching Patrick Gordon for the last 20 years. Patrick Gordon's diaries are here, in the military archive of Le Fort Palace. He kept a detailed, vivid account of his life, even in the middle of battle.
So let me understand. There was this little boy from Aberdeen.
Yes.
Who ends up going to Poland at the age of?
At the age of 16.
16. And the idea was that to send a son to Poland.
Yes, but the thing is that, as he himself writes, he was a younger son of a younger brother of a younger Hus.
Yeah.
So he had nothing to hope for in terms of inheritance back home. And as so many other Scots all over the world, he just followed the track of a wanderer in Europe to seek employment, military employment. You see, as he puts it in this very first volume here, the explanation for his leaving the country is here. I resolved, I say, to go to some foreign country, not caring much on what pretense, or to which country I should go, seeing I had no known friend in any foreign place.
That's fascinating.
Patrick Gordon was fighting for the Polish army when he was captured by the Russians. But luck was on his side. One of his captors was a fellow Scot.
So there are these bunch of Scots lads who said, listen, you've got to come and join us.
Yes, this is exactly what happened.
You're going to be among your own kind. So he was quite critical, wasn't he, of the Russians?
Initially. Let's see if I can...
I love the way you know these books seemingly by heart.
I've been...
And you can go straight to the source. It's incredible.
The people being, now listen to this, morose, avaricious, niggard, deceitful, false, insolent, and tyrannous, where they have command, and being under command, submissive and even slavish, sloven and base, and yet overweening and valuing themselves above all other nations.
In 1682, a new Tsar took over the throne, Pyotr Alexeyevich, better known in the West as Peter the Great. From a young age, Peter the Great was fascinated with toy soldiers.
What happened was that Peter was, as indeed young boys tend to be, was very keen on things military from very early on. So he started with toy soldiers in wood and perhaps other materials, but increasingly he was into reenactments.
As the Tsar grew older, he was given his own real soldiers to play with, a bodyguard of 100 men. Patrick Gordon trained them up for the young Tsar, and they were nicknamed the Toy Soldiers, or Playmen.
You've also got in here, I've noticed some amazing drawings.
That's true. This is volume 3, which is the smallest, but perhaps the most military of them all, with action.
In 1695, Patrick Gordon had a reputation as a formidable soldier. The siege of Azov, where Russia fought the Ottoman Empire for access to the Black Sea, would make him a legend.
So amazingly, they managed to hold out with something like 10,000 men against being outnumbered by 10 to 1 by the Turks and Tatars for over a month.
One diary entry sums up what Gordon faced.
On the bridge, I did meet 5 or 6 Turks with their drawn scimitars and the heads of Christians in their left hands. At these, firing my pistol, I break through and ran to the right hand on the top of the dam. I got out also, and then made as much haste as possible to the Liger, to the Russian camp. So he survived by a hairbreadth, and it was really a miraculous salvation.
That's an amazing escape.
Patrick Gordon served the Tsar until his death in 1699.
Peter attended him several times, almost constantly, when Gordon was on his deathbed, again here in this part of Moscow in November 1699. Indeed, Peter closed his eyes. And of course, the funeral was lavish, and I think no Gordon, not even any Duke of Gordon, was ever buried with such pomp and grandeur as Patrick here in Moscow, because the Tsar himself was in the procession at the head of his regiment.
To sum up, Dmitri, would you say, I mean, apart from Peter, who was the Great, that he was probably one of the most important men in Russia at this time?
Definitely, certainly. In Russia, and I would say more, he was one of the more important men of the Scottish diaspora worldwide.
After speaking to Dmitri, Patrick Gordon's story has come alive for me.
I'm about to fire my first musket. Well, I'm actually not sure if it's my first musket. I think it is. So what do I do? God, they're heavy, aren't they? Put that back, yes.
You should open.
Open.
Uh-huh.
Ah. Okay. In here?
Yes.
All right, okay.
Take it.
Do you hold it there? There. Okay, hold it. Okay. Is that it? There's an interesting postscript to this tale. The toy soldiers, or playmen, disappeared after the revolution, when the imperial family whom they guarded were murdered. And just 3 years ago, Putin decided to reinstate them. And now they are the official guard of the Kremlin.
Time to meet my chauffeur for the day.
Nice to meet you.
It's moving.
Welcome to Russia.
Is it okay?
It's okay. Power in motion.
Power in motion. So, Sergei,
Yeah.
what do I do with this seatbelt?
Actually, you can forget about it. I don't think our police would give me a fine for a broad actor.
I see, but
Normally, you should put it under the leg.
put it under the leg.
Yeah, yeah.
This is so Soviet.
Yeah.
This is what they used to do in the Soviet time. So how old are you?
I'm 26.
So, 26, that means you were born in 1990?
89.
89.
So, to be fair, I'm really proud I was born in Soviet Union, not
Yeah.
Russia.
When I was here in 1988, there was a great optimism because it was perestroika, it was glasnost, everything was changing, Mikhail Gorbachev, everything was possible. You know, it was a great, great time.
Time of new opportunities.
Back then, the city was drab, but unique. Looking around now at the luxury shops, it feels less distinctive.
How do you feel about Gorbachev?
He is the man who fucked up my country. He was, to me, he seems a weak leader. I feel sorry that we live in different countries with Ukraine, Belarus. It's one nation for me, and you know, I'm really sorry we are separate nowadays.
And you think that was Gorbachev who fucked up your country?
Yeah, probably.
But at the same time, he allowed for changes to happen.
I like the changes, but I don't like there is some hate between the nations which were brothers.
We're heading north on the trail of our next Scottish connection. This is Serednikova. In the 19th century, one of Russia's most famous poets and one of my favorite novelists, Mikhail Lermontov, lived here. And, ancestrally at least, he's a Scot. Here to meet me is a direct descendant of Lermontov and Moscow's only expert on Scots Gaelic, Mary Korolova.
Mary.
Hello, Brian.
Kimraha.
Oh, Hamigama. You have Gaelic?
Очень плохо.
I see. Welcome to Serednikova, home where Lermontov stayed during his younger years as a teenager. Let's go upstairs.
And this was his grandmother's home?
Yes, it was his grandmother's home.
Mikhail was cut off from his father and brought up by his aristocratic granny. The Lermontov dynasty began in Scotland. In the 16th century, a Scottish soldier, George Lermont, left Fife to seek his fortune. He settled in Russia and changed his name to Yuri Lermontov. Mikhail would be born nearly 2 centuries later.
So these are all the famous Lermonts, and over here we have. Is this the? This is Mikhail, yes.
No, well, this is Mikhail.
Oh, this is Mikhail.
But this one is his cousin, I believe.
Is it true? I believe that.
Lermontov remains one of the most loved writers in Russia.
He developed a very clear language, which became, some people say, probably the best prose. The best prose for Russia is written by Lermontov, because his language is very clear.
And there's element of self-hatred that comes through in a lot of the characters.
There is a dictionary where they list all the most frequent words of each writer, and the most frequent word of Lermontov is no.
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 Niet.
Yes.
So I grew envious. I was ready to love the whole world, but no one understood me, and I learned to hate. My cheerless youth passed in conflict and with myself and society. And fearing ridicule, I buried my finest feelings deep in my heart, and there they died. Lermontov wrote these words when he was 24 years old.
You can see the roots of that in his childhood. You can see the roots of that in the fact that he was not able to create, be a part of a family, with his dad. Anybody who, I lost my father when I was very little, so I know what that's like, and I know what that does to you, that sense of alienation, that, with not having a father, and I could feel that. I could feel that empathy with him.
Yes, and that's why I think Lermontov always dreamt about his ancestors. He was really fascinated by his ancestors.
Sadly, Lermontov wasn't long for this world. At the age of 26, he got involved in an argument with a friend in the Caucasus.
He was probably considered to be a friend of his, but he was jealous because Lermontov was so talented.
He challenged him to a duel.
He challenged him to a duel, yes, and that's how his life ended. There are lots of speculations whether it was intentional or unintentional.
And he thought it was a joke right until the end, because didn't he fire his gun in the air?
Yes, and Martynov just fired straight.
Straight at him?
Yes.
Shall we go down to the lake?
Yes, let's do that. I'll show you the place where Yearning was written.
This is so beautiful.
In 1831, when Mikhail was just 16 years old, he wrote one of his most celebrated poems, The Yearning.
It looks like Scotland, so it could be one of those Scottish lochs.
Yeah, easily.
It shows how important his Scottish roots were to him.
To the west, I'd be gone in an hour, to the land where my forefathers flower.
На запад помчался бы я, где цветут моих предков поля.
Lermontov never made it to Scotland, his ancestral home.
But he could never fulfill his dream during his lifetime. So my idea was to bring that monument to Scotland so that we could finally, after 200 years, fulfill his dream. And I'm sure that his spirit now rests happily, and he's very, very welcome in the land of his ancestor. He's among his kin.
I'm sure he's very happy.
Westwards, ever westwards would I fly, where flourish the lands of my forebears, where in an empty castle, on mist-clad mountains, rest their forgotten remains. That sculpture now lies here, in the village of Earlston, in the Scottish borders. Today is the anniversary of his birth.
It's a Russian tradition to gift flowers to the monument. So we have a little posy of red roses and thistles to represent Scotland, the Scottish people, and it's tied with a Flower of Scotland ribbon.
Friday night in Moscow.
I love this city. I mean, it's hard not to, but the traffic, oh my God. It's bad. So bad that the uber-rich put on flashing lights and sirens and pretend that they're ambulances just to get through the traffic.
I'm heading to Russia's first Caledonian club, a place for Scotophiles to meet wandering Scots like me.
Russian fusion, Scottish fusion.
It's run by President Vitaly Mironov. Vitaly has an amazing claim to fame. In 2007, he brought Edinburgh's famous military tattoo to Red Square. Over 1,000 musicians from 9 countries took part with a combined audience of over 35,000 people. It's now one of the most important annual cultural events in Moscow. For Vitaly, it's not just about tourism.
Give people opportunity to understand each other better. Because Brian, sorry to interrupt, but because you see, I strongly believe that what politicians doing now, this is horrible thing. I mean, all politicians around the world, they thinking instead of us, they live themselves in plastic world, in world which they create for themselves. You know, but we ordinary people, we don't need to follow this. We need to create our own world and speak with each other. Our people need to see ordinary people from Scotland, ordinary people from Western country, and not follow Russian propaganda, because from both sides it's propaganda, you know.
No, there's a lot of propaganda. This is where I feel there's a real disconnection between peoples because of the politics. And we need a real...
Because we need to understand now.
We need to make the
better.
real connection.
Now it's the right time to do it. Yeah. Because you see what happened in the world.
Absolutely.
It's terrible. It's terrible. So we need to do something. I mean, ourselves, ordinary people. Everything depends from us. From why I'm an ordinary Russian person. I'm Vitaly Mironov. Who am I? I just head of the Moscow Caledonian Club. I have 3 lovely kids. I met my wife, by the way, in Scotland, you know. So I like this country, I like this world, I like this life.
Your wife isn't Scottish though, is she?
No, she's Russian, but she used to be a dancer.
Oh really?
Yeah, and I met her in Edinburgh in 1980. In Edinburgh military tattoo actually.
I spent all my money on whiskey and beer.
But for Dmitry, co-founder of the Cali Club, it's a chance to let his hair down.
I'll play the wild no, and it's
no, nay, never. No, they never no more. And I'll play the wild rover. No, never, no more.
Never more. But every time come back in Moscow Kelly Club.
The next Scot we're about to meet is a man who was so obsessed with communism, he even made his name onto a Soviet stamp, and yet he was never, ever allowed to visit the country. John McLean, the great Bolshevik defender, a man who sums up very neatly where the word Bolshie comes from.
This is the old Bow Hill mining colliery in Fife. Here to tell us about John McLean is my friend, writer and broadcaster, Billy Kay.
Cheers. Thank you. Billy.
Mr. Cox, welcome to the little Moscows of West Fife.
The little Moscows of West Fife.
Bow Hill, Cardenden.
Nearly a century ago, John McLean and his fellow comrades orchestrated a strike here over low pay and poor working conditions.
The great John McLean, his stronghold was North Lanarkshire, Glasgow and West Fife.
Born in 1879, John McLean grew up in Glasgow, graduating from Glasgow University to become a primary school teacher. At the same time, he was beginning to make a name for himself as a political agitator.
Though he was not a strong religious man, he reminds me what went on then a bit like some of the religious revivals. He had the ability to communicate communist and Marxian ideology to the ordinary man. Right. And that was a great, great ability at that time, because the ordinary man wanted something that would take him out of himself and make him think that there was a better world around the corner.
And give him some vision of the future.
And that's what McLean did.
John Maclean became increasingly angry at what was happening to the Scottish working class. He saw Glasgow, the second city of the empire, had become an industrial linchpin in the war effort. In 1915, the Munitions of War Act suspended trade union rights for workers. Thousands of working-class Scots were being massacred in the trenches. Maclean began campaigning against the war. A year later, he was imprisoned for comments against conscription under the Defence of the Realm Act.
Do you like John Maclean?
I do, because I've always responded to that phrase, "All hail the Scottish Workers' Republic."
Right.
Maclean saw the Russian Revolution as an inspiration. The working classes could overthrow the elite, the very thing the British government feared.
Arise, ye starvelings, from your slumbers. Arise, ye criminals of want. For reason and revolt now thunders, and at last ends the age of cant. Away with all your superstitions, servile masses. Arise, arise. We'll change forthwith the old conditions and spurn the dust to win the prize.
In 1919, estimates of up to 100,000 men and women filled Glasgow's George Square to protest for better rights. The government feared a British Bolshevik uprising. They sent in 12,000 troops and snipers to attack the protesters.
He was an enemy of the state.
Yeah.
He was regarded as such, and he was regarded, in later years, the correspondence from that period, he was regarded as the most dangerous man in Britain.
Right.
He was the man who could cause a revolution.
The biggest irony of all this was that he never actually visited Russia.
He never got there.
He never got there. Did he ever intend to go?
I think he would have wanted to go, but he just was unable. I mean, from the Russian Revolution onwards, he was in prison. Something like, in about a 3-year period, he was in prison for about 20 months or something. Right. He was arrested under the Defence of the Realm Act. He went to Peterhead. He was force-fed at times in Peterhead. He eventually came out, but he died of pneumonia in 1923.
On his death, more than 20,000 people came out to pay their respects. Now Maclean has been recognised as the Scottish Lenin and rightfully remembered as the champion of the working classes.
This is a real treasure. It's a stamp with the face of John Maclean.
Only 10 years later, Russia was under the grip of Joseph Stalin. Very few foreigners traveled to Russia or knew what was happening there. But one extraordinary Scot was an exception to the rule.
Sir Fitzroy Maclean crisscrossed Russia's vast empire in the late 1930s, attending the purge trials of the great Russian intellectuals such as Bukharin. Soldier, diplomat, author, spy. Some say that he was even the inspiration for Ian Fleming's James Bond.
Born in Cairo in 1911, Fitzroy Maclean was educated at Eton and Cambridge. In his 20s, he joined the diplomatic service. He'd later go on to be one of the founding members of the SAS. Today, I'm meeting his son Charles at Fitzroy's family home in Argyll.
So Charles, just tell me, what was it that brought your father to Russia in the first place?
Well, he was third secretary at the embassy in Paris in the early 30s and was living a life of luxury, really. When the opportunity arose, he decided, after about 3 years of living this good life, that he wanted to go to Russia, that he asked to be what was then regarded as a punishment post. He asked, can I go to the Moscow embassy? He had a downstairs flat, but it looked directly across to the Kremlin, and I think the view of the Kremlin, well, yeah, here it is, here. That's what he took from his flat. So there it is all. And there was a red star that flashed at night, and the red flag was illuminated. And he said you could hear, in the middle of the night, you would be woken by the screams of people being dragged away by the NKVD and tossed into the Lubyanka. So it was, he said, it was a terrifying time to be there.
Fitzroy arrived in 1937, 2 years before the Second World War. He returned much later in a BBC documentary.
I remember the first time I arrived in Moscow at the station. It was a gloomy February afternoon, dark, snow everywhere, crowds on the streets, all huddled in their sheepskin. Not a very cheerful outlook.
Fitzroy witnessed the beginnings of Stalin's purges, including the show trials of key figures within the Communist Party.
I sat listening to the speeches, taking notes, and in the intervals, I did that 10 hours a day for 10 days. Very exhausting, especially as it went on to 2 or 3 in the morning quite often. In those days, Stalin liked staying up late, and he kept the whole country up late too.
Well, that's rather like Nuremberg, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Proceedings were filmed right through, as far as
I never realised that they were filmed.
They had these...
I've never seen this.
The
But
dock,
extraordinary.
they had these arc lights and movie cameras. There was one extraordinary episode during the trial when the man, poor man who was operating the arc lights, let it get out of control. And it shot right up through its beam of light onto that little middle window up there. And through the dark glass, we could recognize the features of Stalin gloating over his former colleagues. It was very dramatic indeed.
Brilliant.
It's astonishing.
Astonishing.
Absolutely. I mean, to witness that, that incredible moment in history, and of course it must have had a very profound effect on his life. I mean, it must have had a very profound effect, certainly on his thinking and his...
I think he did. I think he was horrified, actually.
In the run-up to war, Fitzroy heard rumors about a possible pact between Russia and Nazi Germany. If it was true, it would change the world. Fitzroy's source was someone deep within the German embassy.
He actually was feeding stories about what was going on in Germany with regard to the certainty of war. If he'd been caught, he would have been executed immediately. So it was a really very serious.
So this was information that your father was getting.
That he was getting.
And certainly very useful in terms of his position.
And he was relaying back to London.
Exactly.
How much people were listening, debatable.
Yeah.
But certainly, you see, we didn't have any spies in Russia. There was nobody kind of able to penetrate at that point.
So now that comes to my next question.
Yeah, right,
the inevitable one. You know.
Ian Fleming was working for naval intelligence. He also came out to Moscow and hung out with these guys at the Dasha and everything.
So that's where the notion that the James Bond connection might come about.
That's right. I think there was a moment, and I can tell you exactly when it was, 1940. The Germans were about to occupy Paris, and Bruce Lockhart, Ian Fleming, and Fitzroy MacLean all had lunch together somewhere.
That's astonishing. Because Bruce Lockhart is supposed to be the other possible influence for James Bond.
But they were all there.
And of course, 007 is the official dialing code for Russia.
That I didn't know. Yes, that's very funny.
Fitzroy died in 1996 after a life of action and achievement. In his later years, he had what many Scots would see as a dream job. he created his very own malt whiskey, and it would be rude not to try it.
Brian, have a seat. I'm going to introduce you to the McFun.
The McFun?
Yeah. Now, this is the first bottle of a new a hogshead, which we just bottled. So we're trying something new here in the sense that it's quite powerful stuff because it's cask strength. So this is at full proof. And sherried oak, single malt. And if you like it, a little bit, a drop of water, that releases the flavour.
That's fine, yeah, that's great. You don't want to drown it.
No.
That's great. Well, let's throw here.
Slangevar. Okay.
Ooh, that's a bit good.
A bit good?
Yes. It's a bit good. So, I just want to raise our last little bit of McFun to your dad.
Yes, I join you with that.
To your dad.
Thanks. To my father.
By the 1980s, Russia was changing almost by the day. Premier Mikhail Gorbachev introduced glasnost, which literally translates as openness. The old empire began to disintegrate, allowing Westerners like me to arrive. I was teaching a group of students and having the time of my life.
Brian Cox.
I just have to say something to the viewers out there. This is a trapped man. I'm trapped between two continents. They've got me here, they ain't going to let me go. They've got me here under pretenses, not false, but spurious.
I'm now on my way to my old stomping ground.
Look at you! Oh, you haven't changed. You look exactly the same. Sergei. Oh, my rock. This is my rock. This man was my rock. My absolute. He was the rock. Yes. What do you say rock in Russian? Rock. Rock. He was my rock.
I haven't seen Alyona and Sergei since the late 80s.
It's like visiting her childhood again, coming back. Yeah. Well, should we go in here?
The famous Moscow Arts Theatre has one of the oldest and most important drama schools in Russia, and I spent nearly 2 years of my life here.
I love this space.
Oh,
come here, I'll show you something.
It's the greatest, one of the greatest spaces in the world. It's just incredible.
After a series of workshops, the production we finally worked on was Arthur Miller's The Crucible. The play is an allegory of the McCarthy era, when the American government began purging supposed communists.
We have to really keep this text. It's tricky, but it's... I was worried that this play might be too on the nose for these young students, whose country, after all, was right in the middle of a state of flux. But you know, the extraordinary thing is, they got it right away. Do you remember this? Do you remember it there?
I wanted to open their world up even more. So I brought them to London. None of these guys have ever seen this footage.
You were drunk? And do you remember I took you around various houses, to all the houses you stayed in?
I remember everything.
Yeah. Well, do you remember who you stayed with?
I remember, of course, in your flat.
Oh, you stayed with me? We mustn't talk about that. Yes, yes, I've forgotten that. So, I am now embarrassed.
Every one of these is a genius. Every one of these is a genius.
Лица не загораживайте друг друга. Володя!
That's right. So you've got a completed circle here.
The biggest surprise was how it changed me. At that time, I was trying to work out who I was and who I wanted to be.
You know, there is pre-Moscow and there's post-Moscow in my life. And everything changed after that because you guys, you taught me so much about being, you know, because you had very little, you had nothing. But your imaginations, you had the greatest imaginations that I'd ever come across. Fierce. I mean, it was just fierce of what you imagined, what you could do. And I was just, so that has never left me. You know, I still think of you and I think of you in rehearsal.
This fantastic experience. We all keep it.
Yeah? It's not left them, it's not left me, and it's something that we'll carry with us to our day and day. It's just there.
At lunch with my old friend, Oleg Tabakov, who brought me to Russia.
It's just, it's overwhelming. Are you okay? Yeah? It's incredibly moving and also leaves you kind of bereft of the right words to describe it.
We ran ahead of time, Brian. We were so free. We've seen so much of the world. You raised the curtain for us. This is for you, and thank you so much. You are like Sergei Korolev to Yuri Gagarin. You selected us.
Спасибо большое.
Олег Павлович.
Будьте здоровы.
It's fantastic. Next time on my Russian Odyssey, we go to the dream city of Peter the Great, the jewel in the crown of Russian culture, St. Petersburg.
They damaged the painting.
Oh. Poor Alexandra Fedorovna got the full might of the Bolshevik. Oh, this is beautiful. I wonder what the people of Leningrad made of this. What is it about this place that gets under your skin?
I mean, I didn't want to say this because you're my father, but I mean, a lot of the time, of course, we were drunk.
Good night. Spokojnej nocy.